We are, Jessica Berman, who is hopefully still going to show up, is dealing with some weather. Her and Michaela are in the red zone. So we hope she's okay, and hopefully she'll jump on in a little bit. But we still have a great panel. I'm Rabbi Jeremy Fine. I'm a rabbi in St. Paul, Minnesota. But the reason I'm doing this is not because I'm a rabbi. The reason I'm doing this is because about 11, 12 years ago, I started a Jewish sports website. And it did it does a lot of different things, but one of those things is we do now, because of the coronavirus, we get to do really cool panels together and speak to people we don't necessarily get to see all the time. And I'm really grateful that we have 3 great guests and hopefully 4. The first is Justine Siegal. Justine in 2009 was the first female to coach in the major leagues, and through batting, for a major league team. For a major league team. I missed that word, team. And, but is also the founder for Baseball for All, which is a nonprofit that helps, I think young, right? Is that an okay word to use? Young women who are, want to play baseball as opposed to any other sport. Justine, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Yeah, Baseball for All is for girls just like you. You're the age group that we serve.
Great. And then we have Annette Snow. Annette is a professional basketball player over in Israel for Maccabi Ashdod, one of the best teams, if not the best team in Israel, although she's currently in Indianapolis, which is not a suburb of Jerusalem, just in case you were confused. It's in the middle of the country. Annette, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you again. And then Alyson Footer, who is a national correspondent for Major League Baseball and a writer who has told me already that her job is very bizarre in the world of COVID-19. But now there's baseball, so you can write again, which is great. Alyson, how are you?
Great. Thank you for having me on this. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So I'm really looking forward to this session.
Great. Well, thank all of you for being here. It's a great panel and different sports. I think what I want to start with for all of you, and this is open to all 3 of you, is, and then at the end, by the way, if you have questions, put them in the chat. And at the end, 20 minutes or 15 minutes at the end, we'll answer a lot of the questions that all the kids have. So how did you sort of get started in your, let's say, industry or your sport? Did you pick up a basketball when you were really young? Did you come to it late? Did you always want to play baseball, always want to write about baseball? Sort of what's your story and how you got to be where you are in your profession?
Who wants to start? Justine, you start.
Okay. I started playing baseball when I was 7 with T-ball, and I just kept playing the game because I really loved it. I played other sports, but with baseball, it was fun to be with the other neighborhood kids, and my brother was usually on the team. And so I kept playing. And then when I was 13, that's when I was first told I should quit baseball because I'm a girl. But I decided I would keep playing forever.
Okay. Alyson, you're also in the baseball world. How did you get to be where you are?
Well, unlike Justine, I was not a very athletic kid growing up. I played a little softball, but that wasn't really what fueled me. But I did, when I was in college, start thinking that maybe I wanted to try to pursue a career in baseball. I was more on the public relations side than I was on the writing side when I first started out. And so I applied for some jobs with minor league teams, and I got one. It was the Canton Akron Indians in northeastern Ohio. And then from there, I got a job with the Houston Astros just a couple of years out of college. So I had worked in all sports in college. I had worked in the athletic department when I was working soccer games and football and basketball and all that. But I loved working the baseball games. That was my favorite sport. And that's really what I wanted to pursue. So I ended up going that way and getting lucky enough to land a couple of jobs. And I've had a few different jobs in baseball since I first started out. I became a reporter later. And so it's been really fun.
And Annette?
Hi. So I first started playing basketball. I don't even remember what, to be honest, since I can remember. And I played through high school, got a full scholarship to play Division I basketball. And then right after college, I actually stopped playing and I got a job with the 76ers, the NBA team. And I did that for about 2.5 years, but I really missed playing. And so from there, I decided to go pursue my career in basketball and play for Maccabi Ashdod in Israel. And that is still what I'm currently doing. So, I mean, I can't get away from it. I love basketball.
So Annette, let's stay on the topic of going to Israel. So what was that was obviously a different, 76ers play in Philadelphia in the United States. So picking up and moving to another country, let alone Israel, what was that experience like? What were the nerves like of that? And sort of how has that experience been for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I wasn't really nervous at all. Just because I have been to Israel so many times and every time I fall more in love with it. I actually played for Team USA in the Maccabi games when I was in college my freshman year. Then the following year, I played for the Israeli national team in the European Championships. And that was my first experience really being in Israel. I was away from my family. I met a ton of people, made a lot of friends. And from that experience, I knew at one point in my life, I would definitely want to live in Israel for a time. And when that opportunity presented itself, I had to jump on it. So, I moved there, didn't know any of my teammates, but I mean, everyone in Israel is so welcoming. I have family out there, which made it easier. And I mean, Israel's my favorite country in the world. So the only nerves I felt were from excitement.
Okay, that's good. Those are good nerves. So let's talk about, so we're talking about Jewish women in sports. So let's talk about sort of maybe the obstacles that you've had as a female in a predominantly male industry, at least in how maybe Annette is not, she's in female basketball, so that's a little different. But Justine, especially with Baseball for All, what are some of those obstacles that you faced? And Alyson, also you are not the only female writer, but there are more male writers. I'm assuming, I don't have that as a fact, but
That's true. That's correct.
I'm going to make an educated guess. So, what have those hoops been like for you, and how do you, since you both have broken down doors, how do you keep those doors open for the next wave of women who are excited about this opportunity?
Go ahead, Justine.
I was the first woman to coach professional baseball. And when I was 16, I told my coach I wanted to become a college baseball coach. And he laughed at me. He just said, no man will listen to a woman on a baseball field. And I was a very shy 16-year-old. So this was really embarrassing to me that he laughed at me. But I decided, who's he to decide what I can do? And so I started planning at a young age, how can I become a college baseball coach? And I did become a college coach. I was an assistant. I was the only one in the country, only female in the country. And then I later ended up coaching college baseball. And I was the only one coaching college baseball. I was the first and the only for years. And I always think, if I had listened to that guy when I was 16, none of my dreams would have happened. And what's really exciting is that this year there's 6 women who have had roles coaching professional baseball. So it may have been a very difficult path for me, but it definitely blazed a trail so that more women rightfully can get on the field and live out their dream and coach baseball.
Yeah, and just to follow up, and then we'll go to Alyson. Topps just released a baseball card for Alyssa, I'm pronouncing it probably wrong, Nakin.
That's it,
Nakin. And I missed it, and I went on eBay and found one real quickly, and I got one, and I'm so excited because it's going to be an awesome part of my collection. So yeah, I mean, it's so, Justine, you absolutely opened up a door, and I believe you have a card too, right?
I have a card from 2009, and I have a card coming out this year with Alan and Ginter with Topps.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, that's also so cool because I remember as a kid, you learn a lot about baseball, not just from watching the TV, you learn about like opening a pack and who these players are and what teams they played for. So Alyson, what about you? How has that experience been for you? Have you been received positively by your male and female counterparts? Is it more competitive? Is it more of a community? What's your experience been like?
Well, it's interesting because in today's age, there's a lot of women writers. There's a lot of women PR directors for major league teams. So when I started out in PR and public relations, media relations, you could be an assistant, you could be on the staff, but you weren't going to be the director. And that was just unheard of. And it's not that long ago that was sort of the norm. And then as the years went on, women were being hired as PR directors, and it was a very normal thing. And they're very well respected. And in writing, a lot of reporters, it's still very male oriented, but you see a lot more women writers around, a lot of TV reporters. And so it's nice because it's just not anything. People ask me a lot, what are some of your stories of being discriminated against? And, I really didn't have a lot of issues through the years. There were some, people saying silly things that they shouldn't say, being a little inappropriate. But for the most part, I worked hard and I gained respect, and you do sort of have a little less of a window to make mistakes because everyone's waiting to be critical. But just going back to, Justine really is a trailblazer. And I just wrote a story that we have printed a couple times. It was originally in Baseball Digest, and now we're using it at Major League Baseball. And it's about these coaches that Justine was referring to. Rachel Balkovec is a coach in the New York Yankees system, and she works with 250 minor leaguers on hitting. And Alyson Akin, who was hired by the Giants, she's the first woman to be hired for a major league coaching staff. And she coached first base during one of their exhibition games right before the season started. So it just warms your heart when you see it, and it's happening very quickly. And it's all about what your knowledge, what you can bring to a team. And anybody who's hired these women will say it was their qualifications, and that's it. And so we're slowly making strides. And Justine threw batting practice to like 7 different teams at spring training, and she had to make a lot of phone calls to be doing that. And that's how I met her, because she came to Houston Astros when I was covering them, and I wrote a story on her. And you know what? Once you get behind that cage and you're throwing batting practice to these guys, they just want to make sure that they're getting their work in. And the guys that I talked to after that, like, we just really needed to get our swings, and she was really good. So that's always something I'll remember from that. That's
great. And I want to do the question and answer part at the end, but Emma had a great question, which is something I want to touch on, because Jessica, who's not here, is an incredible story as well. Jessica Berman is the only female commissioner of any major men's sports. Okay, so we've had actually Jewish women be the commissioner of the WNBA and things like that. But and she's the commissioner. She became like 3rd or 4th, I think, in hockey, and then moved over to run lacrosse. She runs the national lacrosse. So that's happening. I mean, that's an enormous step that if you would have told us 20 years ago, I don't think any of us would have seen that coming. Not in a major professional, but maybe in a minor league or something like that. And her story is just incredible, and how her work ethic and what she brings to the table, and now she's at the table with the major sports. When it's really her. She's incredible. So, but the question Emma asked was, when do you think there'll be will be a pro female athlete in a, she put in quotes, I think respectfully so, in a men's league, so NHL, MLB, NFL, NBA, and maybe what would be the sport you'd first see? I'll add, what do you think the first sport we'll see that in? Alyson, you're the writer. You cover the most ground.
That's a tough one. There's in the whole world, there's only 750 people who had the capabilities of playing at the major league level at any particular time. So 99.99999% of all of us could never play Major League Baseball. So, we're talking about two different physicalities. And so I don't think that, a woman, and Justine, jump in here if I'm totally off on this, unless they want to throw a knuckleball, which is a slower pitch that, it takes, it's more about like finesse and skill and not so much about like how hard you're throwing it. But I'm not sure that in terms of a woman playing in Major League Baseball. Now, I say that in independent leagues, which is sort of like a subsection of maybe minor league baseball, there have been women that have played in those leagues and been very successful. So as far as like playing professional baseball, I think it's a possibility. Getting to Major League Baseball would be very difficult for a woman.
Yeah, we also have seen Division I kickers, female kickers, and it's interesting because some of the women, let's say we talk about the WNBA, some of the women who have dominated in that, let's go to you. Some of the women who have dominated the WNBA probably wouldn't be good in the NBA because being 6'8" in the WNBA is very different than being 6'8" in the NBA. However, you could look at someone like Nancy Lieberman and Sue Bird, by the way, both who have Jewish parents, right? Just that's an aside. They might have been able to very much play. It's a different level. And the question, would they be able to keep up? Nancy Lieberman, because there weren't women league, only played with men, except for the Olympic level. So Annette, have you, I take Maya Moore. I'm in Minnesota. So Maya Moore, I think, is the greatest female basketball player we've ever seen, my opinion, in terms of just skill set. But just in terms of pace, she's not, it just would not work. She could scrimmage, absolutely shoot over anyone. So do you think, have you played with a female or seen a female that you think could actually maybe have played in the NBA? I think it's going to be someone shorter, actually, instead of bigger.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like Alyson mentioned, the physicality between men and women, I mean, it's undeniable. It's very different. So in that aspect, that makes me, question whether that's doable. The one thing is skill level. I mean, I think there are plenty of women who can hold their own, offensively, who can get buckets offensively. Would they be dominant in the NBA? Probably not, because of the physicality factor. And then, defensively, I think would be a struggle. But while it would be an amazing, accomplishment for a woman to do something like that, I don't personally see why a woman would do that when they can be, that much more dominant in the women's game. But I mean, when you think about sports, I mean, you look at maybe golf or something where those types of physicalities, athletically isn't much different. So I can see that happening there. But in terms of, the other sports like football, basketball, baseball, soccer, all of those other sports, it would be difficult to, keep up with men because of that physicality factor. But in terms of skill, I think there's no question that women are equal, in that aspect. But it's just a different level of, strength, speed, all of that plays into effect.
Yeah,
and I'd like to jump in, Jeremy.
Yeah, please do.
Because I'd like to change the question. I'd like to turn it a little bit. First, we have to step away as a society where we think men's sport is better than women's sports. Just because someone can jump higher or something is faster doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a better sport. I mean, how many millions of people watch Team USA in soccer? It's not because they're faster or they can kick harder. It's because they're a team and they were able to execute their strategy and they were able to capture all of the emotions that we love about sports. So I think it's really important that we don't compare the value of men's sports or men versus female athletes. Secondly, I think we also have to look at, do girls get the same chances as boys growing up to develop their sport? Do they get the same kind of coaches when they're 8 years old that expect them to work hard and be athletes and to not just think, oh, they're out having fun? And unfortunately, there's a lot of youth sports that coaches who treat girls and boys differently in that sense of expectation. So I think we need to look at, do girls and boys get the same opportunities, the same elite teams, the same elite training, the same fun programs, all of those kind of things when you get sport. And I think in the US, we're better than many countries around the world, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, going off of that, I mean, if you look at the NBA to the WNBA, granted the WNBA is way younger, you know, than the NBA. So when the NBA was in its first 25 years, it probably did look pretty similar. So I'm very curious to see what the WNBA will evolve to in the future. It's definitely in the right direction, headed in the right direction. But if you look at where we are right now alone, both the WNBA and the NBA are in their bubbles. And you just look at the resources, like Justine mentioned, that the NBA players have versus the WNBA players. The WNBA players are playing literally every other day and don't have nearly the same amount of resources that the NBA players have. The NBA players have everything they can imagine in their bubble. They have the recovery, from recovery, machines, to, you know, doctors, to just even everyday activities. Like the NBA, they can go golfing, they can go boating, they can do anything they want. I mean, I don't know if you guys watch any of the NBA player vlogs, but both the NBA players and some WNBA players have been doing vlogs documenting their experiences in the bubble. And from that, you can see the different technologies that the men have access to as opposed to the women. And, you know, this year, there's more games on national television for the WNBA more than ever. So it's definitely headed in the right direction, but it's really uncomparable when it comes to the resources that the men have compared to the women. Like if they, you know, if they had all those resources, maybe there wouldn't be as many injuries. Maybe they could excel better on the court. They would have better strength conditioning, you know, resources. So, you know, it's definitely headed in the right direction, but there's a long way to go.
Yeah, Justine, I want to touch on something you and both Annette are talking about. And there, so Minnesota is a really interesting place because our best franchise by far in terms of accomplishments are the Minnesota Lynx. I mean, you can ask any Vikings fan. The Lynx are the rule this city right now, and I would much rather go to a Lynx game than a Timberwolves game. I mean, they're not even comparable. So I've sort of watched the evolution, at least over the last 8 years, of the Lynx and the team. I've also noticed that when the NBA team is supportive, or not even just supportive is not even the right word, but like working with the WNBA team, the WNBA team excels a lot faster, meaning it has more resources. Andrew Wiggins and Karl-Anthony Towns go to every game, so these are male players for the Timberwolves supporting, and the women do it too. Rebecca Brunson was working for the Timberwolves for a little bit, and some of those things. She was the WNBA until last week, the WNBA's all-time leading rebounder, record beaten by a current Lynx player also. So have you experienced that, like when we this is just in general, when we prop up women's sports and women athletes from all sides, that experience is a lot better? Because I'm watching that from the WNBA and I'm absolutely seeing it. The Sparks are another example where the Lakers are all in on the Sparks. Whereas Chicago, it's like they're two totally separate entities, like they're playing in different cities. Annette, is that an experience with some of your friends?
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned the Lynx. I've been to probably like every team in the country for the WNBA, been to a game, and the Lynx is by far the most impressive to me. I mean, the fans there, it feels like you're at an NBA game.
Yeah.
It really does. I was shocked to see that, and it was awesome to see. But yeah, when NBA players, you know, support it, it's just all the better. Because I mean, there'll be some people who will just go to a game to see the NBA players, which if that's the reason, I mean, at least they're getting the exposure, and that's how you can build fans. I mean, just the other day, Trae Young took over the WNBA's Instagram. There's things like that just get people more involved. You know, Kobe really, I think, made a dent in everything with wearing the orange hoodie, bringing his daughter courtside to the games. Now that's a fad. You see almost every player in the NBA wearing that hoodie. And supporting women's basketball, watching the games, tweeting about the games, all of that has really grown the sport in just a few months. And you even look at the WNBA's Instagram, I think not too long ago, they were at like 100,000 followers. Now they're almost at 1 million. And, you know, it's amazing to see the men support. Look at Kyrie Irving. He's now donating $1.5 million to pay for the women who decided to opt out of this season. So all of that support, it's only going to continue to grow, and hopefully one day there won't be that gap between the NBA and WNBA, and same with the other sports.
Justine, what's your experience with some of the maybe the barriers that you've seen in front of some of your leagues getting started or teams, and also women who are just playing baseball and trying to make a high school team or a college team?
Well, I started the nonprofit Baseball for All because too many girls are still being told they can't play baseball because they're girls. And I want to change that. So we help communities start girls' teams, and then we create inspirational events for those girls to come together and play one another. And so my hope is that in 10 years, you can just sign up for baseball as a girl, and it's no big deal. Just like my brother or your brother signed up for baseball, and it was no big deal. So not that softball is a bad sport. It's just simply they're two different sports. And I just don't want any girl to feel like she can't do something just because she's a girl. And that's why, to me, it's a social justice issue that we've provided these equal opportunities for girls to have access to everything from sports to science to, you know, whatever you want to do. I always tell kids, live outside the box. Don't let anyone try to confine who you are. You know, be yourself and just go follow your passions. And like Alyson has done, I mean, if you follow your passion, good things happen. It may not look exactly like you think it's going to look, but good things happen. You know, I wanted to play for the Cleveland Indians, you know, but it didn't happen. But I've had a pretty good life, and I've you know, been able to do things in baseball that I would have never dreamt of. And it's just funny. I know this wasn't your question, but I think it's just so important that girls know from the beginning that they can do anything and that they can pursue those things. And sport has a way of making girls feel powerful. And that's why I think it's so important that girls can go ahead and learn their leadership skills and feel the physicality of when you can, you know, someone mentioned lacrosse, all the running that's involved in lacrosse and the sweating and all of that, and losing and knowing that the next day you have to get up and try again. You know, all of that is what makes you a successful person, you know, someone who you know, has a grounding in life. And so I'm very passionate about you girls and you knowing what you can do, whatever you want to do. Or at least pursue it. You may not become a professional basketball player, but you can have the most amazing life pursuing it.
Yeah, Justine and I have crossed paths many times, and sometimes it's at girls baseball tournaments. That now Justine has her Baseball for All, and Major League Baseball has in recent years also taken an interest in girls playing baseball. So they host these tournaments every year in April. They host a tournament called the Trailblazer tournament, which is girls 11 to 13, Justine, or is it 9 to 11? I think it's 9 to 11.
11 to 13.
11 to 13. Okay, so 11 to 13-year-olds, and they are ballers. They are really good, and they bring them to Los Angeles, and they play 3 days of games, and it's so fabulous because all the umpires are women and all the coaches are women. And I know you guys are really young, but there was a movie called A League of Their Own. Does anybody know the movie? Okay. So the women who played in A League of Their Own, that actually played in the All-American Girls Baseball League back in the 1930s and 40s, 50s, are now very, very old. And a lot of them aren't here anymore, obviously. But there are some surviving members of the All-American Girls League that was portrayed in a league of their own. And they come to this tournament, and they go all over. I mean, I see them at a lot of girls' tournaments, and they're like 92 years old, and they are vibrant. And one of them, Maybelle Blair, she will want to play catch with you, and she brings her glove to these tournaments and literally tells people, and the kids don't really know how to take that because she's 92 years old, but then you start playing catch with her and she still got it. And so you have 11-year-olds and you have a 92-year-old, and all these people are there, everybody in between, all with one purpose, and that's for girls playing baseball. And it's like it's my favorite. People laugh at me because I'll go from covering, like, my normal job might be to cover the New York Yankees when they're in Houston. And then last year I went from covering the Yankees in Houston to go into LA to cover this tournament with these girls. And I was so much happier covering this girls tournament, which is not to say I don't love the other part of my job, but there's something so wonderful and pure about just people that love baseball, playing baseball in that setting. It was great.
Before we get into all the kids' questions, I want to just ask about your Jewish life growing up, and sort of, Annette, you spoke about it a little bit, going to Israel a few times, but anything you guys want to share? Did you ever have to make a compromise, or has it taught you anything that you've taken with you into the sports world?
I will say, well, real quick before I answer that, I just wanted to revert back to the original question about do we see women making it to the NBA or MLB or anything like that? And while our answers weren't like yes, we also have to remember these leagues are the best of the best in the entire world. And so with that physicality factor, I think that is the reason why, like, there are men who are in the best shape, of their lives who don't make it. Like, we look at there's 144 women who make it in the world. Like, we look at the NBA, it's like 350, something like that, men in the entire world that make it to that point. And so while it may be difficult to make it to a major league team like in the NBA, most of the women who are in the WNBA have played with men growing up. And so that's something that we need to remember. There's nothing better that can prepare you for what goes on, later in life than playing with men and getting used to that physicality factor. And that'll just give you an advantage later on. So I definitely recommend playing with men and whenever you get the chance to, and that'll definitely help you out. I used to beat men up all the time. I used to play in JCC leagues. I used to play pickup. And like you said, I mean, there's nothing to get a man's respect more than to beat them up in a athletic, competition. But to answer your question about, my upbringing, I do remember when I was a child and I went to go visit Israel, women back then didn't play sports in Israel. And so, I remember my family being like, my Israeli family being like, you're a girl, like, play with dolls, don't play sports, that's what men do. You know what I mean? So in that aspect, definitely. And then in the States, I've like Justine mentioned, women's sports weren't taken as seriously back then, but, now it is a little bit different. And that's really the only thing that I've seen when it comes to, things that we've had to get through. I remember I snuck out of the house when I was in Israel and tried to find my way to the park to play with my brothers, and I got lost and never ended up making it to the park, but there was a will there.
Now you probably know Israel a little better than they do, right?
Right.
Justine and Alyson, you want to talk about your Judaism a little bit?
Yeah, so I went to Hebrew school every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I have to say I didn't like it. The last thing I wanted to do after school was go to more school. And I also was often taken out of sports. I had to leave the basketball team to go to Hebrew school. And I got bat mitzvahed at the wall. All of us in our family have been bat mitzvahed in Israel. And the one thing I have to say is that I'm a mother, so my daughter's 22. And when I was young, I wasn't so sure about what Judaism meant to me, what it meant to be Jewish, well, how I took it. I only knew what my grandfather thought. And my grandfather, I have to say, went to a synagogue where the women sat here and the men sat there, so that didn't make any sense to me. But as I became a mother, I instantly knew I wanted to pass on the Jewish tradition. And I wanted my daughter to be raised Jewish, and she went to Jewish day school. And I totally understood the significance and how much being Jewish meant to me. It's not something I understood at 13, but it was something that as a mother, it just instantly, I'm Jewish, and this is who I am. And I don't need to go to a synagogue where the men sit here and the women sit there, but I can find a synagogue that fits well into my life and my beliefs. So I'm really proud to be Jewish. And as Jeremy knows, I got to coach with Team Israel in the World Baseball Classic qualifier, which is incredible to wear a baseball jersey with Israel across my chest. I mean, it was just amazing, and definitely a life highlight. But yeah, when I was your age, I got to tell you, I looked like a boy. So going to Hebrew school, like if there was a substitute teacher, they would ask me where my yarmulke was, and everybody thought I was a boy all the time. So that didn't help. But I am, as my grandfather says, always be proud to be Jewish. And I'm definitely come into my own on that, and very excited. And I love seeing Jewish youth groups where it's fun. It's fun to celebrate who you are.
And it's also okay for women to wear yarmulkes.
I wore a yarmulke when we were doing the national anthem.
Oh, yeah.
I even asked the guys, I'm like, are you sure you want me to wear one? Because I was already the first woman to be in an MLB event, and it's Israel, right? So I'm already this controversial figure to some. And they're like, no, we want you to wear one. You're just part of the team. And so I did. And it was amazing.
It's one of my favorite photos of the line of all these players. And yeah. Alyson, what about you?
I had one of those kind of normal traditional upbringings in Dayton, Ohio. As Justine was talking, I had all these memories flooding back of the playing sports at the JCC. And I mean, to this day, like I'll see or I'll come across a friend from my childhood and who might have been on my basketball team. I was the only girl on the basketball team. So that's really the only options that we had. And I scored exactly one basket in my basketball career. And and it was just like one of those, just do it and see if it goes in, and it did. And it still makes me laugh. And I played soccer at the JCC, and then I played softball when I was in high school in BBYO. And I have just kind of great memories from that. I did go to Hebrew school, and like Justine, I didn't like it. But we look back on how just poorly behaved we were in Hebrew school, and I think that might be a universal thing. And I still laugh about it with my friends. But the interesting thing that's come out of this, all of this staying home and being on Zoom, months ago, somebody from my high school years in BBYO, she sent out an invitation to a bunch of us on Facebook to maybe get on Zoom and talk, and none of us had seen each other in decades. And we do it every week now. There's 6 or 7 of us. These people I literally have not seen. You're always bonded by your Jewish friends, and you always you have those bonds forever. And every Sunday at 11 Central, we all get on Zoom and we just kind of talk. And one of our friends is over in Israel. And this is his only connection to his Jewish friends. And we laugh about some of the things that we remembered, some of the dances that we went to with each other, some of the parties that we went to. And it's great. So you always have those bonds with your Jewish friends.
So I'm going to read some of the questions. The first is who was the biggest, or was there a biggest female inspiration for you inside your sport or even outside your sport that sort of led you on your path? It's open to anyone. And that's from Emma.
I have to think about that.
For me, growing up, it was definitely Mia Hamm. I played soccer as well. And I just idolized her. She was incredible, especially at the time, that was how long ago? You know, I don't even know how long ago, but it was at a time where, you know, women's sports was even like less respected than it is now. And Mia Hamm was one person who, regardless of all of that, just still was a monster and really excelled in everything she did. And she had that same, you know, attitude similar to like a Kobe, that, you know, she's going to win at all costs. And so that's who I really looked up to. People used to call me Mianette because of her. But now currently I really admire Serena Williams. If you have, there's a really great documentary series on her. I think it's on Netflix, I want to say. If you haven't watched that, you definitely should. It'll give you a little glimpse into, you know, her life and how she got to where she is today. And, you know, it even goes into, she recently had a daughter and how she got through that. And I just think sports really teaches you how to get through all stages of life. And it's important to find that female athlete that you can connect to and aspire to be. Because, you know, there's nothing better than seeing someone do it and striving to do the same, if not more.
Justine or Alyson?
Yeah, listening to Annette talk, it made me realize, because Mia Hamm is actually around my age. So I didn't really have a lot of female athletes when I was growing up that that became so mainstream in your era. So that's very cool to kind of hear that, because I sort of forget, because when women's sports were really gaining steam, it's when I was already an adult. You know, that women's soccer team, that World Cup team from 1999 that you'll hear about forever, that was such a big deal. And that game that they won, that kind of captured the world's attention. I was with the Houston Astros, working for their PR department, and I was with the team in Kansas City. Because I will never forget this. The game is going on, the soccer game's going on, and I'm standing right outside their clubhouse, their locker room. And when they won that game, the whole clubhouse erupted. Like, all these major league players that are getting ready for a game are screaming, and you hear USA chants. And I went, wow. You know, and they were talking about it for days after that, just how cool it was. And so I think that's pretty awesome. And I'm scouring my brain. I mean, Martina Navratilova was the big tennis player when I was growing up. But as far as Billie Jean King, I mean, she had the Battle of the Sexes, and that was before. I was too young to remember that. But they were so few and far between when I was growing up, and it's so nice to hear about Serena Williams and Mia Hamm, you know, people that are just mainstream athletes, not just women athletes, but just mainstream athletes. It's very cool.
Justine?
I am probably the oldest one on this call, so.
No, I'm older than you. I
didn't have any female role models, I have to say. I mean, in baseball, I was always the only girl. Here and there'd be a girl and she would drop out. There was no woman for me to look up to in the baseball world. In soccer, definitely Mia Hamm was it. And interestingly, her daughter plays baseball. But you know, I just didn't have that. My walls were filled with major league pitchers like Nolan Ryan, which is sad. And that's another reason why, you know, Baseball for All exists. It's for these girls to be able to see other girls playing baseball. If you come to our event and you're 10, you're going to see a 12-year-old still playing, and the 12-year-old's going to see a 15-year-old still playing, and the 15-year-old is going to see an 18-year-old who's playing for Team USA. And then you're going to see a whole bunch of graduates helping out with the tournament as administrators and coaches, and you're going to see 90% female umpires. I mean, we are all about role models and showing, not just telling you what you can do, but showing you that you can do it by all the girls who are around you. So it's really important to me that people have role models that they can identify with.
And for all, I'm just going to jump in for 1 second. For all of you younger people anyone below Annette's age, it's important to let your rabbis know that you want to see let's say, I'm going to say Jewish because otherwise I'm not sure it would be a synagogue event, but a Jewish female athletes. One of the first programs we did at the synagogue was I arranged, it took a lot of pulling strings, but we arranged for the synagogue to go after a Lynx game to meet Sue Bird. And I was like, I'm a rabbi, I have a voice, let's see what happens. And I had to negotiate with the Lynx, and I had to negotiate with the Storm, and we did. And I think I might have told Annette this, but my daughter was holding a basketball that we were going to have signed, which is in my office, right? And she drops it, and Sue Bird picks up the ball, and she passes my daughter, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, I can't believe my daughter's 2. I'm like, you don't even know what just happened there. Like, to me, she's like, you know, the best point guard ever. So I'm sitting there, and you know, her word of advice was, don't just play one sport. That was her big thing. I was like, how do I get my daughter in the NBA? I know she's 2, but let's say I'm a crazy father and really, really want her to play. And she was like, don't force her to play basketball. That's your best chance. And so just let your synagogue know, let your rabbis know that this is important to you. And if they don't adhere to that, I mean, some of them might not be sports fans, that's true too. But if they're not able to, you call me and I will yell at your rabbi for you. That's the best part about being a rabbi. I can yell at other rabbis. There was one other question that I want to end with. Shira asked, so there was a side chat about sort of being drafted in sports as a young kid, like at recess, let's say, for those of us who remember recess. So why do you think here, it says, why do you think women are underestimated? And I'm assuming that means it's sports and at school. Is it, Justine, maybe you have the best firsthand knowledge of some of this. You know, was that your experience as children? And how do we sort of overcome that?
Well, to overcome that is huge. It's a huge discussion. But I do think that girls and women are often underestimated. And I unfortunately think that what happens is when a girl does really well, everyone's so shocked. And to me, that's so insulting. So in my scenario, it's when a girl strikes out a boy, everyone's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Look at her. It's like, no, she's just a baseball player who's, you know, and this is what happens when a pitcher and a batter play together.
Right.
So I think that it's up to you girls, Risa and Emma, Marissa, you're the generation that's really going to change everything so that kind of comment isn't going to happen. It's like, oh, you do this? Oh, you're the math champion? Oh, yeah, that, like, okay. You know, it's not as big of a deal. And so I think Annette's on the fringe where she's getting to benefits from some of like the girl power stuff in Title IX and really have a whole generation of girls who played sports. And I think there's a lot more work to do. And that underestimating, always use it to your advantage. Let them underestimate you and then prove them wrong.
Yeah, going off of that, you know, I have been in scenarios where, you know, I was chosen first, and then I've also was in scenarios where I was chosen last, and not because of my ability, but because I was a girl. And, you know, all it takes is for someone, for, you know, to change those people's minds is go ahead, let them choose you last, and then show out and show them that, you know, they made a mistake, and next time I guarantee you won't be chosen last. But, you know, unfortunately, just because of the way things have, you know, dating back in the day, you know, women would be known to, you know, do the girly things, which didn't involve sports. And so I think that's where it stems from. And now we're in the process of, you know, Xing that out and showing how powerful a woman can be in athletics as well. But, you know, that don't ever take that personally, you know, use that as fuel to show and prove people wrong.
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on this, but I'm going to try to simplify it. There's a woman who has a very high position in Major League Baseball who has been an assistant general manager for 2 of the premier teams in baseball, who has all the qualifications to be a general manager, to be the boss. and probably never will be. And people ask me why, and I say because they're terrified that she would actually win a World Series. So the point being that sometimes women, the people that are judging them don't actually maybe want them to succeed, and there's different reasons for that. So I think what's happening in the last several years and the trend that we're seeing is that women are getting these opportunities and being encouraged and being lauded for being successful, instead of people being afraid that they're going to be successful, and then maybe that might be taken as like reflecting poorly on somebody else. And so, you know, what we talked about earlier with these women who were hired as coaches, they have uniforms on. Like this Yankees coach, she is wearing a pinstripe Yankees uniform during spring training. And the woman who is a coach for the Giants, like it's now being looked at as, we know you can do the job, and we actually want to see you succeed at this job. And I think that's very important that things have changed a little bit.
But Alyson, don't you think it's just gross to see anyone in pinstripes? That's a Yankee joke. Come on.
I'll add one thing, and I know we're on a time crunch, but
Yeah.
I decided at 16 I would get a PhD because I wanted to use. I knew I wouldn't have the same opportunities as other men in baseball. I wouldn't get to play Division I baseball. I wasn't good enough for that. So I decided to use education as a tool in my toolbox that most men don't have. I mean, a PhD is like the highest level of education pretty much that you can get. And so that was something that I decided to do. And if you're an underdog, if you're going to be a first in whatever you do, or you just feel like an underdog, you are going to have to overqualify yourself. You know, you're going to have to work harder. And that's not necessarily fair, but that's the way it is. And I know that education is very powerful way to climb up the ladder. So that's just something to think about. If you're in an underdog position, what are you going to do to make yourself more qualified than everyone else around you? Not the same level, more qualified. And I think if you do that, you're going to start to see things like Rachel Balkovit with the Yankees. She taught herself Spanish. She got a double master's degree. She did all these things so she can wear those pinstripes. And if she can do it, so can you.
But you know what Rachel had to do when she was first starting out? She had to change her name on her resume to Ray to get anybody to call her. As soon as she put Ray down, and it was not gender specific, her phone started ringing off the hook just by the qualifications on this piece of paper. And then she put the phone, and then they'd be gone.
And for me, when I coached with the A's, I had to ask for 4 years. 4 years of asking before I got them to say yes. And every year making myself more and more qualified. And then it happens. And that jersey's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And now there's 6 women coaching pro baseball. So you can do it. You can do it. It's all possible.
It's a great way to end. I want to thank our panelists so much. Thanks, Josh, for setting all this up. And it was so great spending time with all of you. And lots of work to be done. And a lot of you have done a lot of the work for everyone. And that's important too. So thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. This was so much fun. It was nice chatting with you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great
Bye.
day.